So hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today to present our first book in partnership with Literal Publishing. Thank you, Rosemary, Salum, for your trust in this challenge for Hablemos Escritoras. My name is Adriana Pacheco, and I am founder of Hablemos Escritoras podcast, encyclopedia, and Shop Escritoras online bookstore for the United States. Our project is dedicated to make visible literature in Spanish and English written by Latin American and Hispanic heritage women writers. So today we have the opportunity to celebrate a marvelous writer, critic, and thinker. Angelina Muñiz-Huberman has been an example and an inspiration for many, me included. And her translator, the great Dorothy P. Snyder, a fantastic, fantastic person and great supporter of this project. And of course, nobody can do this better than another two great women, Esther Allen and Nora Glickman. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for accepting this invitation. And of course, thank you for reading Arrhythmias, a book that I think is going to mark the life of everyone that can read it. So this presentation is recorded and is going to be on YouTube for more people, but we wanted to do this event by invitation because this is a tribute. It is a tribute for Angelina and for Dorothy. And of course, the one that has to be very involved in this beautiful event is one of my fantastic cómplices, which is Rosemary Salum. So, Rosemary, el micrófono es tuyo.
Muchas gracias, Adriana. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. And it's a joy to be able to have this book published along with Hablemos Escritoras with Adriana. And I would like to do a brief introduction of the participants so you can get to know them a little bit better. Angelina, of course, is our author. She was born in Angelina Muñiz-Huberman, obviously. She was born in France. She's an award-winning author of 50 books of poetry, stories, essays, and works in translation. She's credited for introducing the neo-historical novel and Sephardic mysticism into Mexican literature. On January 14, 2021, she was awarded the 7th chair of the Mexican Academy of Language. D.P. Snyder, Dorothy, is a bilingual writer and feminist translation from Spanish. Her translations appear in Latin American Literature Today and World Literature Today, among many other publications. Her book-length translations are Midi Pleasures by Monica Lavín and Arrhythmias by Angelina Muñiz-Huberman. She lives in Hillsborough, North Carolina. Born in Argentina, Nora Glickman is a professor at Queens College and the Graduate Center at CUNY. She received her doctorate in New York University. Her most recent narrative collection is Il Van de Instantes. Among her plays, Suburban News received the Jerome Foundation Award. Her critical work centers on contemporary Latin American Jewish issues, women, and cinema. Esther Allen is a professor at City University of New York Graduate Center. She has translated a number of works of Latin American literature into English, including the Penguin Classics edition of the selected writings of José Martí. She's currently compiling a biography of José Martí. So again, everybody, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And I would like to, let Dorothy start her conversation with Angelina and of course, with Nora and Esther.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Adriana and Rose. And thanks to everyone for being here for this night. It's so wonderful. Angelina, maestra, shall we read to them first? What do you think?
So maybe as you like it.
Very good. So I invite you to read our selection from Microcosmos. We're going to read a little selection from Arrhythmias. It was hard to choose from these 32 essays, all of which are microcosmos of their own. But we choose Microcosmos. I chose Microcosmos for this evening, in part because of its musical theme, and also because of the absolutely hypnotic rhythm of the prose. Maestra, would you do us the honor?
Oh, don't you think it's better first in English?
Well, if you think so, then I think so.
Yes.
Beautiful. Okay. Microcosmos. To those who wonder why. He watched the snowflakes falling on the other side of the window pane, and they were not snowflakes, but instead musical notes, white notes, with the weight of snow, the color of snow, the longevity of snow. It's time. 4/4 time. Do, re, mi, fa. Sol, la, si, do. Do, re, mi, fa. Sol, la, si, do. Do, re, mi, fa. Sol, la, si, do. 4/4 time. Mathematics and the golden rule. The white of winter, the cold winter, the ice, the frost on the window pane of the mind. The notes strike unhurried in measures, do, re, mi, fa. A man sells potato knishes, rubbing his hands against the cold in a dark alley in Brooklyn. It is so cold that few customers come out to buy. Sol, la, si, so, 4/4 time. There behind the window pane, the man would love to eat some knishes, but he has no money, not a single penny, and even his fireplace has gone cold. He puts on every piece of clothing he can find to bundle up, clothes on top of clothes, his scarf and his gloves. When the vendor lifts the lid off the big pot of knishes, the steam seems to reach all the way up to the man in the window. With that alone, he eats, with the slight whiff of food that he manages to inhale while the music swirls around in his head. 4/4. A brief dance in the form of a canon. Re, do, re, mi, fa, mi, re mi, fa, do, re, sol, fa, mi, re, do, re, mi, fa, sol, re. How many piano students will be obliged to repeat that melody years and years later? Knishes, potato croquettes, is what he used to eat in his native land. And then he would sit down to compose in the New York winter of 1944, the last he would ever live through. He doesn't have enough money to buy a half dozen knishes. No one cares about his music. It makes sound only in his head.
And now I will read it in Spanish. Veía caer los copos de nieve tras el cristal de la ventana y no eran copos de nieve, sino notas musicales, blancas, notas blancas, con el peso de la nieve, el color de la nieve, la duración de la nieve, su tiempo. 4/4. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. 4/4. Matemáticas y regla áurea. El blanco, invierno. El frío, invierno. El hielo, excuse me. El hielo, el cristal de nieve en el cristal de la ventana, en el cristal del cerebro. Las notas golpean, pausadas, pautadas. Do, re, mi, fa. Un hombre vende knishes de papa. Se frota las manos de frío en una oscura calle de Brooklyn. Pocos clientes bajan a comprarle. Es tal el frío. Sol, la, si, do. 4x4. Tras del cristal de la ventana, el hombre quisiera comer knishes, pero no tiene dinero, ni una moneda, y hasta la chimenea está apagada. Se pone todo lo que encuentra de abrigo, prenda sobre prenda, la bufanda y los guantes. Cuando el vendedor destapa la olla de knishes, el vaho parece llegarle al hombre de la ventana. Con eso come, con el leve olor que alcanza a aspirar mientras la música bulle en su cabeza. 4x4. Una breve danza en forma de cano. Re, do, re, mi, fa, mi, do, fa, do, re, sol, fa, mi, re, do, re, mi, fa, sol, re. ¿Cuántos estudiantes de piano habrán de repetir esa melodía años después? Knishes, croquetas de papa, eso comía en su tierra natal y luego se sentaba a componer. En el invierno neoyorquino de 1944, el último que vivirá no tiene ni para comprar media docena de knishes. Su música no es apreciada, no suena sino en su cabeza. 4x4, está enfermo, la leucemia avanza. 4x4, el vendedor vocea los knishes.
So, it's such a beautiful beginning, and it's one that touched me so deeply to translate, because this essay is in part a dance between silence and music. And I wonder, Angelina and I had the pleasure of being able to sit with her and talk about these essays. And we met 5 times, Maestra?
How many?
Times. I think 5. I think
5?
we met 5 times.
I don't remember.
I think we met 5 times. I have this in mind, and each time was a revelation to me. And we'd go over chapter by chapter, and I would talk with her about my doubts and my questions. But I didn't ask all my questions because that would be impossible. And one of my questions about this essay is the silence, and the great silence in the essay is the name of the composer to whom you are referring.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if I might ask you about that. I have my own feelings about it, but I'd rather hear it from you. Why do you not mention his name?
Well, first, I will say that I also enjoyed very much the sessions with you about the translation, because I also learned many things about the text. So that is, I think it's a 2-and-2 task. So I enjoyed very much. Well, the silence is so important in everything, in the whole life. Silence is even more important because in silence you can put whatever you want, whatever you wish, whatever you desire, and close the whole feeling of the world. And especially in music and in poetry, silence is also very important, because silence is always that small pause that you take to breath, to take air and be able to breathe. So the silence is more important than speaking and writing, and that's what I think.
Yeah, I think in this essay that was particularly evident, but it was evident in others as well.
Excuse me, I didn't answer the name.
We left it in
That's why I
silence.
didn't put it's obvious for the people that know, because I also like in writing, not to say the whole things, but leave silence, a space for people, for the reader to fill it with whatever he wants. And the one that, by the title of Microcosmos and by all the atmosphere, if you love music, you know who is the author. And the reader is very happy to discover something, not by telling the writer who the musician was.
Well, this is what I very much felt, and in our work together, one of the chief lessons for me was economy of expression, brevity. I remember the comment sobra, various sobra, and I learned very quickly, like within the first 5 chapters, how to condense myself to fit your prose, because your prose is so careful. And that's why these essays, these 32 essays, which seems like a lot, right? 32 essays, but then you have the book here, and it's not that large a book, and yet it is a large book. So this book is a series of delicious contradictions. And one of those contradictions is how much is inside the brevity of the essays. Each essay for me was an exploration. As a matter of fact, I haven't told you this, Maestra, but I read a lot of books to translate this book, because not because I had to, but because I wanted to. For example, I had never read Austerlitz before, so I felt I needed to read Austerlitz. I didn't know about, this is the one about W.G. Sebald's poem, Pigeon, right? I needed to know what that was about. I read Sephardic mystic poetry, lots of it, to try to get a sense of these silences and these brevities. So this little book is really a whole library, actually. And it was for me, and I hope readers take time with it, because one of the things that I think, especially in The Guts and the Skin, which is one of my favorite essays that you and I read together, the notion of how velocity is changing our lives as readers and writers, the velocity of technology, I think is very important in this book. What do you think of that? Because I see this as a book that's sort of to be read slowly and carefully.
Who is going to answer?
You.
Oh,
It's not really a question,
again.
but is that how you see it? We have 2 more minutes, so I'm just curious.
I see.
Do you see this book as much of a meditative experience as I felt it while I was translating it and reading it?
Yes, it's a book to open. That is why it's not a big book, because it has many ideas. That is true. And the purpose was to open the mind and to question ourselves and to take into account why we are here, why we do the things that we do, and then histories also. And then fantasy invention, for example, Gershon Scholem and Walter Benjamin can have a dialogue that I invented, that I created, that it did not exist. So it's a book to open the mind to everything that you wish, you desire, you want, you need. And I'm very happy that you started reading Sebald, because he's a very important writer of our time, and he was also in the plan of mixing reality, fiction, and things that happen and things that he invented, even about his own life. So well, you have the You read it.
Well,
That's it.
just one more quick question. There's Georges Perec too, and I wonder how much of the Oulipo writers, how much does Oulipo influence what you do?
What, excuse me?
Your piece on Georges Perec. How you and Georges
Oh,
Perec?
George
Yes.
Perec, yes. Well, for example, that is a good example of what I said. I imagine that when I was a very little girl, 2 years old in Paris, Georges Perec, who is a French writer, as you know, and he has, well, the same age than me. And maybe, but who knows it? Maybe we were playing together because he used to go to the same park that I used to go when I was 2 years old. So it's imagination again. Maybe we were playing together and we didn't know.
Maybe. And
Maybe.
that I think is a good point for us to end on, because what I see that is very connected with you and Georges Perec, besides your playground in France, is your playfulness. No, and that's what I feel in the collection so much is how you're able to talk about very serious things and things that are very serious to all of us, both as readers and human beings, but be playful with language at the same time.
Yes, I would like to mention only the humor. For example, the old age and the bones of the body are speaking about losing all capacities and things like that. So I can imagine also the bones of the body speaking and thinking.
Well, shall we give it over to Esther and Nora?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
Yes.
hello to everybody, and thanks again for the invitation. I admire the work of Angelina. I've been reading her for a long, long time. I have not read all your books, but I think that this is my collection of your books, Angelina. And, well, playfulness, of course, is a very, very important aspect, and I think that. Although you say many times that you don't respect rules and you create your own rules and you invent them and you are you can expand and be arbitrary about things and move from one century to another, from one country to another, from back and forth. I think that you are very organized in your structure. I think that when you say that this is Sunday or Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, you are planned it very, very carefully behind all that playfulness. I also think that you do a lot of research, of course, before you start writing. So when we read about Matteo Alemán in the 20th century, you know very, very well what happened with the previous with Matteo Alemán and how he relates. So I like that very much, the way you jump from one century to another and how you transport us. And I think that you are also challenging the reader to follow you, because sometimes it is hard to place ourselves in the way you want us to. But once you decide in the tone, if it's a picaresque tone or it's a meditative tone, once we get into the character, we can follow it, and it's fascinating to follow the trajectory. So that for me has been a very interesting thing to do. Now, what I like most, since I know you personally, I've had the pleasure of sharing with you several conferences and times where we had together, is the stories that you have from memories of childhood, of your parents, and of your different exiles. Perhaps because I identify with that. You have one parent saying one thing and the other parent saying the opposite, and you have to make up your own mind as to what you want. So this is a very introspective way of looking at life, and I think that was the way you explain it, as your mother encouraging you to write and your father correcting you and disciplining that. It's a very good way of it's an interesting way of starting, and especially because you were not schooled in like everybody else in a normal school. You were schooled most your parents at the beginning, right? When you were in Cuba, before you started regular school, your parents, your mother's refrains, your mother's quotations that are so beautiful because of the Sephardic heritage. I always like to, I write them down. I write them down, Pulillo de mal asiento, and all the others that you have.
In their tujes.
Yes, that's right. Yes, you translate that. Well, those are for some of the things that impressed me the most in your books. I let Ellen continue, and then we'll
Thank you for that beautiful reading. That was really spectacular. And I have a couple of questions for both of you. First of all, I'm really interested in this idea of the essay. You've both used the word essay. The book doesn't actually identify itself as an essay collection. In fact, I kind of think of Arrhythmias as the definition of a genre. The texts in this collection generically can be identified as arrhythmias, but you've both described them as essays, and so I'm interested in how you're using that word and how, Angelina, you also have won prizes. I know you won a Major Via Rutia prize for one of your short stories. So how would you say makes a difference for you in your own writing between an essay and a short story, a cuento? ¿Cuál es la diferencia entre ensayo y cuento?
Well, the problem with my writing is that I don't write exactly short stories or essays or poetry, and even the way the paragraphs are in the book, sometimes people get mixed up because they say this appears as poetry because it's one small line, small line, and small line. And no, what I do with that small lines is to make the reader pay attention why this phrase is only in the, or even in the center of the page, not to the left or to the right. So I am always playing with those possibilities because I think they make more big the understanding what is literature, but what is life itself. So I don't think there is, for example, in Arrhythmias, you have some are like short stories, you are right, but then other are only 3 or 4 lines. Well, someone is speaking.
Oh, I think they muted themselves now. You can go on.
Okay. So this is not what worries me. I don't care if it's a short story, if it's a essay, it's a poetry. I just want to be very sincera, you say that word?
Sincere,
or I am
sincere.
Creating it, sincere. Yes, so whatever comes to my mind, because I think the mind is so big that your inside, your conscious, your mind, your thinking, your desiring is so big that you cannot put it into words in your whole life. So I want to pick up arrhythmically those moments, those instants, time memory. For example, what you said about Nora, memory. I created a genre that is called pseudo memories because what you remember is not always what really happened, because there are different points of view. So I want also to make a polyphonic, a poly view for what I write. I don't know if it's good or bad, but that's what I do.
I would call it operatic in the sense that you have a lot of music in it. You identify with the music that you hear, the music that you would suggest, because many times you tell us who it is, what it is, the music you're listening to. But it's also the art of it, the staging of it that I like. I feel that I'm in a like I say, operatic in the sense that you see all the well around it, the way you describe it, the way you go to detail sometimes, and the way you like to repeat. Because one of the things that you have in Arrhythmias is that I see the characters here, and I say, aha, yes, I read about the what's the name of the name escapes me now, the photographer
Robert Capa.
Robert Capa. I read that. I met Robert Capa before. I met Stefan Zweig before in other books of yours. They reappear. Kafka reappears. So it's very, to me, it's very encouraging because I feel that I'm part of the family. I know them. I've seen them before, and I know how well they react. And photography is another very important aspect of it because the way the camera points to certain subjects, that's the way you read it. You seem to translate what the camera is seeing. So that I like very much, the artistic part of it, the musical part of it. I was wondering if you have any of the books in which you accompanied it with the music, which we can hear the music. Is there something that you did?
Oh, yes, the one you have for the Kabbalah, the one you showed just a minute ago, it has music, a partiture, because my son is a composer. I think you met him in New York.
Yes.
And sometimes he makes music for my own compositions, his compositions and mine. So, for example, the name for those who are thinking who was the music of Microcosmos, the one we read, it was Bela Bartok, of course, you know. And I used to, everything that I write, I immediately read it for myself in out loud. So I can hear, even if it's myself, so I can hear how phrases go, how the rhythm or the rhythmic, when I went to a rhythmic of the phrase develops.
I wanted to ask you something, perhaps because I'm saying something that we like a lot, not just about love, but also about death. And I wonder if the subject has, as we grow older, if it has a different type of approach to it, in the sense that, you know, you at the beginning, you talk of being born, and being is the same as being death at the beginning, because you have to develop and you have to grow, and then you have to, but once you developed and once you've grown, you're not born again. So how do you envisage, or how do you approach to it in the course of time? Do you think that now you're at a different place than you were 40 years ago when you were writing about death?
I think it's the same, because I started to know death since I was a small girl.
Your brother.
Because at 2 years, when I was 2 years, my brother, who was older, was 8 years, was killed. And it was a very terrible way of dying. And my parents were always speaking about my brother, and all my girlhood, I don't know if you're infancia, they were childhood, no? They were speaking about my brother. And then at the same time, it was the Spanish Civil War, the Second World War, the Holocaust, everything that took place and that I knew since I was 2 years old, because my oldest remembrance of something, it was because I told my fathers, and they told me that I was 2 years old, that small episode. So I think death as natural as life, because it's the constant company of us. We are always, we like it or we don't like it, we say it or we don't say it, but we are always thinking of death, because we know that everything around us goes down, the trees, our pets, our friends, everything. So death for me is a company so I don't think it's different what I think now. I think that when I was 2 years old, I was thinking the same as because I also take into account very much childhood. because I think that that part of fantasy and of lying that the small girls and boys have, it's cut down in the school because they say, no, that's not true, that's not true. But why not? Fantasy is as true as reality, as science. Art is as true as science. So that is very important.
It's interesting that if I may, it's interesting Angelina says that, because Tobias Carroll in Worlds Without Borders compared your work in Arrhythmias to Werner Herzog and his notion of ecstatic truth. And I had to go running off to find out what ecstatic truth was, because I wasn't clear about that at all. But what Herzog says is that facts are for accountants and truth is for art. And that I think he made a gran acierto with that discussion of Herzog and you. Just, I wanted to put that in because I think that's very true. And I think it does apply to Arrhythmias as well.
And that same attitude, that positive attitude towards death, I find it also in your writing about illness, that you can live with illness and you can adjust to illness, and you can use it as in a positive way to use your time in bed to think and to create and to imagine things that move forward rather than suffer from it so much. So that it was an uplifting way of looking at illness.
Yes, of course. Illness, I think, is very makes you aware of time, because illness, immediately you think that you're going to die. So illness is makes you change the idea of time. I have written also about the relativity of, not as Einstein, but the relativity of time. If you are happy, if you are, times became short. Why this thing that made me happy is finished? But on the contrary, if you are tired, if you are bored, etc., time expands, is very big. So time is relative. We're used to look at even now at the watch, at the clock, etc. And illness changes all your world, and then you think, well, Proust is the best example for that. En busca del tiempo perdido, looking for the lost time. So all the things that you think are negative, they're not negative.
Well, certainly the reviews of this book have not been negative. Dorothy mentioned the Tobias Carroll review in Words Without Borders, and there's also a beautiful appreciation of the book in Literal magazine by Greg Walklin. So I want to congratulate both of you on that, and also obviously the editors who are doing their work really well and bringing a lot of great attention to this project. And I have a question for Dorothy. Whoever paired you and Angelina obviously did a fantastic job, because you're both musicians and writers and translators and interested in language. You just inhabit the same kind of constellations of things. So I'd just like to know a little bit more about what brought you to this book.
Well, what brought me to this book is the Capitana Adriana from Hablemos Escritoras, because it so happened that I was going to Mexico. I go every year. I go to Mexico City to see friends and do things. And I was going, and she was going, because it was around that time, I think January. And I said, let's meet for lunch, as you do, So we did. And we talked about this project with Juan Bonilla, who published, Bonilla Artigas published this book first. in Spanish in a beautiful edition. And the three of us sat at that table. And that is where Adriana's tremendous intuition takes over. And I don't think Adriana actually knew that I was a musician or any of that. Or maybe you did. I guess you did. Actually, you did know that because you'd interviewed me. And it was really Adriana who sort of in a chemical way, almost like a chemist, like a really good chemist said, we've got a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I think these two will work out. But then we had the magical experience of going to Angelina and Alberto's house. And that was really the magic door when we passed through into her house in the middle, in the middle of the pandemic too, which was a little bit nutty. Where, you know, we're going to their house and we sat and we talked. And I, for my part, pretty much fell in love with both of them, really in a profound way, like a profound way. I found myself and still find myself deeply touched by Angelina and her husband and her family and her house and her way of being touches me deeply. And that was fundamentally important to me in translating this book. Did I answer your question? I'm not sure.
You did. And you actually
Let me
perfectly
add something, Esther. It was the tequila during the lunch that was actually what convinced both of them. And then without the effects of the tequila, so we went to visit Angelina, and Dorothy and I cried. So it was so emotional to be there with her that we cried. We couldn't stop that sentiment. And that is my short contribution, sorry.
Now you are making me to cry. Ahora me hacen llorar.
Well, I think there is something though, Esther, about souls meeting, and I don't want to get too, you know, sort of fluffy on everyone, but I think when you meet people and you fall in love with them in a very real way, and you know that that what you're doing is important, because I don't want to miss saying that I feel with my whole heart that this book is important. And I care about people reading this book. And that is partially getting involved. You can get involved, as all of you know who are translators, you can get involved on various levels with a book. You can just translate the book, you can do it as a business, or you can do it on the level of soul. And this project was on the level of soul, and it very much had to do with meeting Angelina and her beloved Alberto, and being in her house and being there with Adriana también, you know, because to be there with Adriana was to have a confirmation that what I was feeling was not crazy. You know, we were both feeling this sense of the importance of the moment. So, yeah.
So now that you've evoked Angelina's life, that brings me to a last question for Angelina, which I think is part of the real genius of Arrhythmias, is the way that it both is and is not autobiographical. Your own life is sort of woven throughout the book. We get these glimpses of you, but as everyone, even without having read the book, just from listening to this conversation knows, we've got Bella Bartok and Sebald and so many other names, Walter Benjamin, you know, just an endless list of incidents from the lives of many other people. And so I'm interested in hearing your answer to the question, how do you write about yourself by writing about other people?
Excuse me? How do
You
I
seem
write?
to be writing about yourself. You seem to be writing about other people as a way of writing about yourself, or there's a connection between your autobiography and all of these other lives. And I wonder how you would describe that.
I don't know, because, for example, I am thinking in one of the texts that appear in this book, in Arrhythmias, it's trying to be other people. Maybe I have to be I, but what happens if I was not I, and then I am you, or he, or she, or them, and all the pronouns. Because I was telling you, there is one story, I don't know how to call it, story, about a terrible episode that happened in the Spanish Civil War. And that is the 3 photographers. One of them was Gerda Taro. And when they were making the retreat of the army, of the Spanish Republican Army, she fell down from the car that she was, and a tank came in the other direction and passed over her. It's terrible death. So she died, all her entrails, everything, terrible. And she was very young, in her 20s. She was the fiancée or the girl of the Robert Capa that you mentioned, Dorothy. But instead of speaking of that, what I try to do in this short story is what the tankist will think and will feel all his life, that he had killed this young photographer, that it was a kind of pet for the soldiers, because she was Hungarian, French, Jewish, and very pretty, and a photographer that was very something out of something strange, a woman photographer in the middle of a war. And so what makes me think, what was he feeling? So I changed myself into the tankist. I am the tankist. And this happened, and this that is what I felt. So I don't know if I answered your question.
I think you did. I think you did. And I think now, Adriana, am I right? Is it time to open it up to questions from
We have time for 1 or 2 more questions, Nora.
Yes, I want to say something about that because it's what Esther was saying, that you are in the characters and you are intertwined many times, and like you said just now with the tankist. I in 1993, you gave me a little. You gave me something, and you wrote here. Para Nora, una breve tarjeta de introducción, con un abrazo, Angelina. So I thought it was like an introductory card, and I did not pay much attention to it because it was like an introductory card that you have the address and so on. But now, because we were preparing for this, I read it, and it's very, very personal. And this is finally you, and it's called you see Angelina Muñiz-Huberman here, and it has photographs of you with your mother, who was such an important person in your life. And you have one here that I was, and of course, a reproduction of your first short story when you were 5 years old. The first short story, 8 years old, with your handwriting. It's a beautiful story. And then there is a photo here of your coming in the boat. It says, a bordo del Oropesa, Angelina and Montserrat Cert, March 1939. And you're a baby here in her arms. I was very impressed by this tarjeta de introducción because I never imagined I would get so much from it. So I recommend it highly.
And what is the title of that book, Nora?
It's called De Cuerpo Entero.
De Cuerpo Entero.
De Cuerpo Entero. Yes.
That's the name of the collection. That my title inside is El Juego de Escribir.
That's right, because that's one of the chapters, how you make a story, what you prepare for a story, giving like instructions for a person who wants to learn how to write a story. It's beautiful.
So we still have time for 1 question or any comments that you would like to share with everybody.
Well, I have only one comment, Rose, and that is to Esther's question that she asked a while ago, which had to do with why I've been calling these essays, and Angelina already answered that question. It would be better to say there are no essays or no stories or something of that type. But I've been calling them essays pretty much because I see a direct line from Montaigne to Angelina Muñiz-Huberman. Montaigne basically looked at the self in his search for truth in the essay, and his idea that I myself am the matter of my essay. I myself am the matter of my essay, because the only point of view we have is our own, And so in the search for truth, Angelina follows that track, which is why I connect the essay Montaigne and Angelina Muñiz-Huberman, strangely enough, born not far apart in the southern part of France. Montaigne was born in Bordeaux and Angelina in Hyères, a little bit to the east. So I see her in that tradition, which is kind of why I use that word.
Perfect. Is there anyone else, or Adriana, would you like to add something else before we say goodbye?
Yes. First, I want to thank everybody, but I have a question for the public. First, before that, I have to say thank you again to Rosemary, because it might be my idea to translate Angelina's book, but I really needed a publishing house. And what I want to try, or I want to prove with this project, is that you don't need to be a publisher or a publishing house to translate books. You can be a literary promoter, like Hablemos Escritoras, and have partnerships and have agreements with the people that are translating books. And we have several experts in this chat, in this room today, that are working hard in translating books. Samantha, thank you for being here. Daniel, we really admire and support your work. And this is my question. How many, in which ways can we really open doors in the United States for such great authors like Angelina, that she is well known in Mexico, Latin America, and in the Spanish-speaking world, but for the United States or other Anglo-speaking countries, it might be a new name, actually. And this is a piece of art. I read Arrhythmias in Spanish, and I thought this is a piece of art. So we really need to share this with the Anglo speakers. And I was very lucky that Dorothy had everything to translate. So what do you think, you all guests today, in which other ways we can really open those doors that many times are closed for us in the United States and the English-speaking world?
May I say something about that?
Of course.
So, first of all, yes, the United States has the biggest English publishing market, but it is not the only English publishing space. I mean, I'm thinking of Seagull Books, which is in Kolkata in India, and is a very, very reputed publisher, has published a number of foreign publications. And I think there are some translators on ATA who work with them, actually. And I'm thinking of Ross Schwartz. I think she does French to English.
Ross does, yep.
Right. So I think there are other options to expand to. I think you're doing a great job, Adriana, because honestly, I had last year through ATA, I had the chance to review Migraciones, the translation of Gloria Gervitz's work. And so I actually did not even know anything at that point about the whole history of Jewish and Sephardic Jewish migration to Mexico. So it was itself a big learning curve there. And I had to look at her work and also the work of the translator, of course. So So for me, I think what you're doing is already a step in the right direction, but also engaging with partners outside of the US is not a bad idea. There are people who have an interest. And right now I can tell you that as you have already interviewed my friend Sid in India, there is a huge market out there because there are English readers all around. And I can't say that's even, that would probably be just as true of Africa. There are tons of people there who read in English, and where they're readers, they must be publishers. So I don't know if that really helps you in finding people, but Seagull Books is certainly one that I know that is very, very good.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
I want to comment that Eunice Rodriguez Ferguson is with us from the Sundial House at Columbia University. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on that question.
Well, thank you, Dorothy. I just wanted to mention that we are hoping to contribute to this effort. I'll add the link in the chat, but our goal is precisely to hope to bring some of these voices into an audience that does not yet read them in English. So I'll put the link. I don't want to be self-promoting, so I'll just quietly put the link on the chat. Thank you very much, Dorothy.
Well, sorry, who did I cut off?
That's fine. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll just say that I'll second what was just contributed by Yadana Pudi. Did I pronounce your name correctly? So we gave, at Words Without Borders, we gave the publisher of Seagull Books the award that we now give annually for the person who we think has done the most for publishing literature in translation into English. And Seagull has been around for 40 years. It's well established, and they've done translations from many, many different languages. I also think when we look at our readership on Words Without Borders, about half of our readership is now based in the United States, and the other half is all around the world. So, that's just to back up your other point that I think there is a growing kind of reading public in English. And the question is, how do you access that public? And this is something that we think about all the time. Now, Esther wrote an article like 20 years ago for Harper's Magazine about how only 3% of the literature that's published in translation in the United States is that's published is in translation from other languages. And that at the time, I haven't looked at the statistics since, but it's like the same amount of translated literature being published in the Arab world, where there are real issues with censorship and other barriers to entry for authors. And I think since then, since Esther wrote that article, that the situation has improved a lot, Adriana. And I think there are many players, particularly in the independent publisher space, who have kind of popped up like toadstools here and there. And they're trying so hard to get this literature out there, but it is just incredibly difficult. And it's compounded by the fact that, there just aren't tons of readers out there who have discovered that international literature is something that, enriches their life. So that's how we've come to think about what we're trying to do at Words Without Borders is, how do you get this book, Arrhythmias, into the hands of the people whose lives it will enrich? And I think we have to get really creative about ways to do that. And I don't know the answer, because there's lots of people. I guarantee you, the guy who runs Deep Vellum, Will Evans, is thinking about this every day. And Matvey Yankovic, who's the publisher of World Poetry Books, is thinking about this every day. And it's just a very difficult market space right now, because margins are low and there's not a lot of payoff. It's a labor of love. But that doesn't mean we should give up. I think we have to keep trying and collaborate as much as possible, which is why we wanted to review Arrhythmias in Words Without Borders.
Well, thank you so much, Samantha. It's very enlightening what you just said. And I just want to mention that in literal publishing, we, I was recently invited to Dubai to the book fair, the Sharjah book fair. And I met with so many, publishers, and we made us a few arrangements to have our books also published in, not necessarily published, but taken to, the market in Africa and Europe, like all of you were saying, Eunice, and all of you were saying. So, yeah, like you said, we need to keep working together to make this happen. And if there's no one else that have a comment or a question, we think we have had a magnificent reading and presentation, and we thank you all for your participation. Adriana, if you would like to say something.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Thank you. This was great. Angelina, this was a tribute for you and your career, your path, and a marvelous translation, Dorothy. Thank you, Nora. Thank you, Esther. You know that we love you. And this is the example of that. Yeah, thank you to everyone. Yeah, muchas gracias.
Thank you. The same.
Bye.
Besos.